Hi, welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I'm talking to Brian Morgan. Brian joined the Army in 1975 and after attending Junior Leaders Regiment Royal Artillery, served with 7 RHA and then later with 3 RHA, along with a few other places. He tells us what it was like going into training and then serving with 7 RHA when they were in Germany. He tells us about the shock of training and how he had to grow up quickly, and then the let's say the rough life of a young soldier in the 7 RHA in Germany, and the regimental life, let's say. He tells us what it was like to do P Company, and then later on in his career he changed trades to Artillery Clerk, serving as a staff clerk in various places and a Chief Clerk in 3 RHA. Upon leaving the Army in the year 2000, Brian ended up with a job with Northampton Police in the custody suite. He also talks about Purple Warriors, a charity organisation that organises dragon boat racing, and how it helped him later in life. I hope you enjoy this story. I enjoyed listening to it. If you like this podcast or the previous ones, please consider buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Frankie'sPod. It just goes to help fund the software and the hosting. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, I'm talking to Brian Morgan. Many people from 3 RHA will know who Brian is. Many people from 7 RHA will know who Brian is. Hi, Brian, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Nice to speak to you.
And you. It's great to see you again. Right, so I'll just ask you the same questions that I ask everybody else. So can you just give us a quick overview, well, quick, as long as you want, really, an overview of where you grew up, what it was like, and what made you join the Army, and go on from there, like.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, well, I was born and grew up in Durham, February 1960. Born in my grandma's back bedroom. There was me, my mum, and my 2 brothers. We were your typical working class family, really. We didn't have a brass baby rub together, but we managed to get through. Growing up, nothing was particularly special about it. We just got on with our lives, going to school, and doing our best, as it were, sort of thing. I always had an interest in joining the military, although I've got no connections to the military at all. And it was just a case of it was something that I always wanted to do, sort of thing. I was in the Air Cadets, and that got me sort of into the sort of military lifestyle and that kind of, So I was determined, no matter what else happened, was to join the Army at the very first opportunity. And sure enough, at age 16, I was left school 2 weeks and off to Bramcote to the Junior Leaders Regiment, Royal Artillery. Because interestingly enough, when I started to look at a military career and joined the Army, I didn't really have a clue what to do or where to go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go to the cruise office and the guy behind the desk, if he was from the artillery, said, "Oh, you want to join the artillery?" And so I was chatting to a lad at school, and he was going to do the same, join the Army, and he wanted to be in the engineers, and that kind of appealed to me. Being a plant operator, or so you get a skill in the trade, but at the same time you'd be in the Army, with this impression in my mind that, well, I'll join the Army, get a few trades, do a couple of years, and come back home and with the skills to get a job in Civvy. So needless to say, when I joined up, I went to it was the Army Selection Centre at Harrogate in them days, the old Royal Signals Apprentice College. And you went there and did your various bits of tests and one thing and another. And then they told you if you'd scored enough to have the choice of what corps regiment you wanted to join. And I think that the Royal Engineers had filled their quota. So he said, "I'm afraid there's no vacancies do you fancy the infantry or tanks? And so I thought about it, and I said, what about the guards? Because the Scots Guards recruit from Durham. And he said, stand against the wall as a measure on the wall. And believe it or not, I think I was 5'9" or 5'10". He said, "Oh, you're too small to be a guardsman," and that was it, sort of thing. And then he says, "Oh, what about the Royal Artillery?" Oh, yeah, well, what's the Royal Artillery? What do they do? And he explained about the artillery and the different trades and skills that they could have, and the fact that they're a junior league regiment, and that if I was happy, I could have a guaranteed vacancy there and then, sort of thing. So, sure enough, signed on the dotted line, and the rest, as I say, was history, sort of thing. So,
it's a bit mad that nearly everyone I've spoke to who's actually ended up joining the artillery, I think out of like, let's say 20 people who I've interviewed who were actually in the army, there was only probably about 3 of them actually wanted to join the artillery. Everybody else was trying to join something else. Like me, I went for the Air Corps. Like most of the people I spoke to wanted to join the Air Corps and there was no vacancy, so I ended up in the artillery.
I mean, I just wanted to be in the army regardless. So they could have told me anything, and I would have probably taken it, to be fair. And I think if you haven't got a connection or family members or someone saying, "Oh, that's a good place, get in there," you know what I mean? You just go wherever there's the vacancy, sort of thing. So,
yeah, I mean, I had 2 brothers in the army. One was in the engineers, one was in the signals. Both a lot older than me. And the one who was in the signals, my elder brother, he was like, "Oh, you know, when you join up, you want to join the Pioneer Corps." I says, "Why?" He goes, "Well, because you're quite intelligent. You'll be miles ahead of everybody else who's in the Pioneer Corps." And I mean, I didn't understand what he meant until after I joined it. But I mean, like I was telling you earlier, the guy I interviewed last night, he was in the Pioneer Corps. And I'm bloody glad I never joined the Pioneer Corps, put it that way.
Oh, no.
So how did you find Bramcote when you first got there? Was it a shock to the system, or were you quite au fait with it because you've been in the cadets?
I don't think you realise until you look back. I was wet behind the ears, naive, no life experiences whatsoever, and suddenly you've done it. You're here. You're in the army. What are you going to do now? And when everyone asked me to explain, I said, well, it was sort of a bit like a boarding school on one aspect, and on the other side, it felt a little bit like being in Borstal because well, it was about harsh discipline, getting you to suddenly realise you're in the army and you do as you're told, and you jump when they say jump, and if they say jump, you say, "Oh, aye," that sort of thing. I was in a thing called a midterm intake, and so I joined in I think it was the June '76, and the following May I mustered as a gun and field guns, and left to join 7 RHA in Germany. So it was only a very short time compared to some people were at Bramcote for 12 months, 18 months sort of thing. So in that aspect, it was getting used to the regime,
Yeah.
I never didn't know how to use an iron and stuff like this, and it was that sort of. And in them days, as we all know, it was the bunk beds, bed blocks, inspections in the morning, inspections in the night time until you got it right, sort of thing. So didn't get it right, it went out the window and that kind of thing. So
yeah. I mean that never changed. I spoke to guys who joined the junior leaders in like 1958, and I said, "What was it like? Do you think it changed? Do you know how different do you think it was compared?" I spoke about what it was like when I was there, and he was like, "We had it much harder in our day." And I'd imagine you had it harder in your day. I mean, I joined '85. It's like 9 years later. But it's.
I mean, yeah. The army's changed just as much as the rest of the society has changed these days, and so things will invariably have been different. But back then, sort of thing, and it was, I think, to some degrees, quite a brutal regime. If you didn't get it right, you got clip in you.
Yeah.
You too far. If somebody wasn't pulling the weight, they were told to get a grip, and then unfortunately things went not necessarily for the best. I think sometimes when people get sort of bullied and but that's, I suppose, how they get the numbers down to what they want.
When I spoke to my brother, he went to the Army Apprentice College with the engineers in Chepstow, and we touched on it when I was talking to him about being bullied and stuff like that. I mean, I was lucky in juniors. I had a really, really good troop.
Yeah.
We didn't lose too many people. We had really good troop sergeants. The troop commander was X297, a Sergeant Major, a bloke called Julian Fox. He's passed away. Oh, he was a brilliant bloke. Really, really good bloke.
I actually served with him in 7.
He scared the shit out of me, I must admit.
That's Biff Piper's brother-in-law.
Wow. Is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I never knew that. Wow.
Yeah.
The first exercise we went on, like the first fieldcraft one, we were all in sleeping bags and he's walking around with a blanket. And he was like, I'm sleeping in, I'm not used to a sleeping bag. I'm having a blanket. Yeah. And he'd just sit there with it wrapped around him and we were just thinking, what the hell? You know what I mean? He was comfy as hell. That's the way, that was him. But he was a great bloke. And I really, really enjoyed my time being under him. That sounds a bit weird, that. But, being in his troop and everything, we had a good time. But I know that some of the other troops who I was at juniors didn't. And I've spoken to guys who were at juniors before me and after. And as much as nobody wants to say that bullying went on, it did. But we didn't see it as bullying. We thought it was just normal. It was acceptable.
Yeah.
It's only later on as you grow up a bit more and think, like you say, society changes, that you realise that, but it was just the norm, really.
Well, it wasn't so much the staff. The troop commander was an LE officer, X1 RHA. The troop sergeant was a fellow called Tom Chandler, 2nd Field Regiment. And then there was another, Taffy Tyrrell was the 2nd sergeant, and he was from 20 Regiment. And just the fact that they were grown men who've been in the army about, 10, 15 years, whatever, you were just in awe of them anyway.
Yeah.
And I don't think at any stage they were physical with the young lads. I think the bullying came from the other young lads sort of thing, and so if they said, oh, he's not pulling us with, or I'm not happy with him, they took it upon themselves to try and rectify it or bully the other soldiers or things. So, yeah.
I mean, it is what it is, and it was what it was. But it's what made people as well. Like you're saying, you joined there, you were wet behind your ears. Getting taught to shave, getting taught to wash, getting taught to wipe out your ass. Some guy stood in front of me half naked with a bit of toilet roll. I was thinking, what the hell's going here? This is how you do it. I think I know how to wipe my ass.
Yeah.
I didn't know that bit. But it was like a total shock. But it was enjoyable. I enjoyed juniors, type of thing. So you went to 7 RHA straight after juniors then?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no coincidence that the rugby officer at Bramcote was X7, a guy called Phil Wilkinson. He's now the Police and Crime Commissioner for Wiltshire, I believe.
Oh, bloody hell.
He was a cracking rugby player, and if anybody had any decent talent, you knew they were going to get directed to somewhere like 7, and so that's how I ended up joining 7. And then at that point they were still in Aldershot, but I think they left Aldershot in about February, March 77, and so they'd been in Osnabrück for about 3 or 4 months by the time I arrived. But you can imagine that was a bit of a culture shock for them. They'd lost their parachute title, so they were just 7 RHA.
Yeah.
They'd had their red berets taken off them, so you can imagine there was an awful lot of unhappy bunnies within that regiment. Blokes that had joined the army to be a para, and suddenly now they're a crapper in Germany. So when I joined, it was at times a tough old experience getting bedded in and settled in and learning who not to speak to and who to speak to and that kind of thing. It was pretty brutal at times, and you know what the block's like in Germany. You've got a three-story building with the cellars. There's a battery bar upstairs and doors are getting kicked in and one thing and another. And if you were the new guy, you just knew your bed was going to be next to the door, and maybe your bed would be getting tipped over and stuff like this. You can laugh about it now, but I suppose at the time, it probably wasn't any fun at all.
Just going back to something there. I mean, a lot of people who are, well, my age and younger than you, who've served, won't even realise that happened. That 7 RHA wasn't para, and it was fourth reg.
Yeah.
How did that happen? I don't know. Because I kind of knew it had happened, but I don't know why or why it changed back or whatever.
Back in the day, it was called 16th Independent Parachute Brigade, and it consisted of 2 para, 3 para, all the arms. So you had 9 parachute squadron, the parafield ambulance, 7 para RHA. They had the Guards Independent Parachute Company. There was the RAOC had a parachute squadron, and like any other thing, the government started chipping away and saying, "Oh, we don't really do we really need paras in this day and age," and that kind of thing. And so they disbanded the whole brigade. So when 7 lost their title, the brigade gave them little Pegasus on their number 2s to show their association and service with the Airborne Brigade. And they went off to Osnabrück. At the same time, 3 para were posted to Germany. I think 2 para stayed, and 1 para were on the AMLF in Bulford. So essentially, in those days, they felt paras weren't really needed. They were only necessary when you have a war on, sort of thing. So it was too expensive, and I think it wasn't until '82 they realised that perhaps they could be handy to have an airborne brigade, and I think 2 and 3 para showed what they could do at a short notice and one thing or other. So essentially, you've got a whole regiment who had been paras who are now not paras and in Germany. I think there's quite a lot of the boys went off to Hereford. Some of them went to 2-9. But a lot of them obviously stayed to see what Germany was about, see if they would like it and one thing or another. And I think if you've served in Germany, you know that the drink culture was parcel of the military life, really, wasn't it?
I can imagine what the locals were like, all these area arse paras turning up and just taking over the town. It must have been horrendous.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's a 17-year-old lad. So essentially, I'm not even legal to vote. I can't go in a pub in the UK and legally buy a drink and thing. And suddenly here I am in Germany where I've got all this money and, it was quite a torrid times. It really was. And, I suppose you look back and think, well, I survived it. It's not necessarily means that's a good thing. It's what's molded you into the person that you probably are, although you went on to be in your service. But some of the things that went on were really quite harsh and brutal. And, I was assaulted by a guy when I lay in bed. And I'd had a disagreement with him earlier and ended up with a bit of a fist fight. Nothing out extraordinary. Bloke service like in the block, you have a disagreement, quick exchange of blinking, and then that should have been it as far as I saw. But he wasn't happy because I'd obviously come out on top. So he waited until I went to bed, and then he came in with 2.5 foot of shelving metal. And then he proceeded to beat me around the head with this piece of metal. I mean, the only saving grace was that I woke up, because otherwise I might not be here to be talking to you tonight.
Jesus.
But, I finished up in the BMH, the military hospital in Munster for 2 weeks. So I was rushed to the local cranking house, where they stitched me scalp back up and give me these injections of fluid into the scalp to put it right. So
Jesus.
It was no surprise that my nickname was Mental in 3 hours. But that's the sort of thing that happened, and it was just kind of like, well, yeah, it's one of them things, sort of thing, you learn from it, and you grow up. And the learning lesson from it was you make sure you lock your door when you go to bed.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So then they got the wings back, didn't they? They got everything back as well.
They had a good period in Germany, and I think what happened was the regiment kind of evolved into that BOR type soldiering sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, we had a tour to Ireland, and then we came back from there, and then we had a new CO, a chap called Giles Arnold, who'd come from 3RHA, and he was an excellent CO. Excuse me. And the RSM was a chap called Bob Harms. Don't you remember him?
Yeah.
He was he was the QM of 3rd RHA in Colchester. And between the pair of them, they actually started to shape the regiment and put more emphasis on the sport, because obviously in them days there was bags of time for sports and recreation. And as was often the case with regiments in Germany, a lot of time you concentrate on specific sports. So whether it be football, rugby, hockey, whatever the sport, they'd have the teams and they'd have the time to train. And they got the reputation of being 7-hour show. Oh, yeah, that's the artillery sports regiment sort of thing.
I mean, when I joined, it was 50 missiles, so yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, they were there for all those years, you know, and they were never going anywhere other than Menden. Once a year, they'd go and fire a missile off at St Kilda or somewhere in the Hebrides. And so they were the Army athletics champions, weren't they? And the Army basketball champions or whatever it was. But we were due to arms block move in 84 to Thorney Island. At that time, we were in Germany equipped with FH-70. And we were an FH-70, which was quite a big gunner regiment, the numbers and whatever. And then it was after the Falklands, they realised there was a requirement to have a high readiness brigade, ideally airborne, consisting of 2 battalions of infantry and the normal ratio of attached arms. And so I think they initially offered it to 4th Regiment. Said, oh, well, would you take on the para role? And because at that time, I think they had 1 battery and the OPs who were sort of airborne or para-trained. And I don't know what the reason was, or whether they didn't want to take the role on or what, but the CO7 said, yeah, we'll take that role on. And sure enough, instead of going to Thorney Island, we arms block moved, swapped with 4th, and they set about getting as many of the boys through P Company in short time, so that they had the numbers up. Clearly, some people stayed with 4th, others went elsewhere. Not everybody was going to pass P Company. Not everybody was going to be needed to pass P Company, because even in a parachute regiment, not everybody has to jump out of the plane, let's be honest, you know. But they set about running their own pre-para. And so some of these lads who'd maybe not been para or serving with paras for 4 or 5 years were now suddenly strutting around in blue tracksuit tops with the wings on, beating us all to death because they were going to put you through what they'd been through, kind of thing. to be fair, there was some good training areas in and around Osnabrück where we ran up and down hills with stretchers and bergens, logs and everything else. And that what it did, it more or less mirrored P Company. But that was just to see if you were fit enough, and they thought you'd be good enough to send to the depot in Aldershot. Because what they didn't want to do is send people there, and after 2 days them be coming back to the regiment, because it wouldn't have looked good, sort of thing. So you essentially did P Company twice, because you had a full test week, and you had to pass that to go to the depot. And then when you got to Browning Barracks, the para-reg depot, it was start all over again.
So
and
it was never a case of they were going to lower the standards to get people back in and stuff like that.
No, I think all they did was increase the numbers that they could put on a course. And I kid you not, we would maybe send back 40 or 50 blokes at a time to go to Aldershot, and And so I've got a course photograph. We're all sat in front of the decor outside of the battalion quarters in Browning Barracks. And there was maybe 120 blokes. That's day one, with all the instructors and DS at the front. Probably by the start of test week, it maybe was half that number on the course. And then as test week goes on, people are going to get injured. As a matter of fact, it's not going to happen, And then at the end of the course, you've maybe got 45 blokes left, of which maybe 30 odd will pass. And I had the unfortunate position of getting a Morgan, sir, fail. There's no questions, there's no debrief. You failed. And then they just look you in the eye and say, you got the balls to come back and do it again, sort of thing. And I was like, oh my God. I went back to my room and just literally cried my eyes out. Literally cried my eyes out. So for me, it was a case of I was determined. I really wanted it. I wasn't going to not, give it. Well, I've had a crack. I didn't make it. So I went back 6 months later, and thankfully I got the Morgan, sir, pass, thank you. And that's the key to understanding why what's so special about you thinking your maroon beret, I've earned that.
Yeah.
I sweat blood and tears for that sort of thing. So, it meant a lot. It meant an awful lot. So having passed that, you then got back to Germany, sort your kit out, moved the regiment back to Aldershot, and then we had to get the guys then filtered through to go to the parachute training school at Bryce Norton to get the wings.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think, well, that's straight. That's going to be the easy part. All you got to do is throw yourself out of a personally serviceable aircraft.
Yeah, that's not easy. Just mentally, that's not easy.
But the first few weeks that you're there, I kid you not, you start off on a mat, so you fall over, so you get your ground rolls together, then onto a bench, then onto something a bit higher, then you go up in the top of the hangar, then you go to the outdoor exit trainer, or the knacker cracker as they called it, because if you didn't get the straps done up properly, you soon knew about it when you jumped out of it. And then in those days, we used to jump out of a barrage balloon as your first jump. And it literally was 4 of you got in with the RAF dispatcher, and it took you up 800 feet, and then it just stops, and there's no noise, no sound, just the wind whistling away. Then he just moves the thing, right, you come forward, hands across reserve, away you go. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 check copy. When we got there, for some reason, the balloon wasn't working that day. So we'd done 3 jumps out of an aircraft before we got to that stage. So blokes had got used to that. So suddenly you've gone into this little basket gondola thing. It's quite a different scenario. There's no forward momentum. You've literally just got it's a bottle check. Jump, look for the tail, and jump out. I think there was 1 or 2 that decided, no, I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this. And I had on our course there was, I think, 3 that refused to jump, and it's not something you see often. Yeah. So it was quite a high proportion on our course, and it was on one jump, because you start off doing what's called clean fatigue. So you've got a parachute, a reserve, life jacket, no weapons, no equipment, and you stood ready to go. And the guy who was in the door was from 23 Parachute Field Ambulance. And red light come on. And when the red light comes on, your hand should come down, cross reserve to go. And all that happened with him, he went, red on, and his other hand come up. And then the PGI was trying to pull his hand down, and he just looked at him, and you could see in his eyes, he just didn't want to. And the guy just went, right, unhooked him and took him to the back of the aircraft out of the way. Then he grabbed me, he says, you're not going to fucking refuse, are you? I says, no, I'm definitely not refusing. I was determined because I wanted to get through it, sort of thing. Jumped out, no problems at all. But I had another one, and it was further, because you can get up to 45 troops either side of the aircraft.
Yeah.
And when you're all hooked up and ready to jump, it gets quite claustrophobic. And I looked at the guy behind me, and he literally is just unhooking himself off the static line and sat back down. And it was like, what's going on here? And he just went, I'm not doing this. Credit to the boys. It takes a lot of bottle. Sometimes it's easier to jump than say.
No, I was going to say that. It was like...
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say that most blokes did what we said was, every jump was a night jump because they had their eyes closed the minute they got to the door.
I mean, I suppose there's a bit of peer pressure in there, really.
Oh, well. Absolutely. Yeah. You know, and it is quite, and it's an adrenaline-filled experience. You know, it's hard to explain. You've been stuck in that aircraft for these 2 hours. You're hooked up, ready to go, and all you want to do is get out. When they open the doors, the fresh air comes in, and it literally, because the aircraft's on a bit of an angle, you just literally getting pushed out. So when it gets there, you arrive, and one of the dispatchers turns you into the door, and the other one literally pushes you out. You're going out whether you like it or not, anyway. And then once you're out of the aircraft, that's just the first part, you know, because they're coming out what's called sim sticks. As you go out, there's one following on the other side. But the idea is that you should do this kind of thing in the air. But what happens is people get stopped or they'll go too early. So you suddenly have two blokes going out together. Well, clearly, boom, people are meeting underneath the aircraft. Or they get too close. And what happens is if you have one parachute gets above the other, it takes its air, it's called an air steal, and then it's a race to the ground to see who's first to hit the floor. So, yeah, absolutely. And so I'm pretty grateful that, you know, that I did it. I'm certainly proud that I got through it. But again, it was just for a little cloth badge that goes on your arm to show that you've had enough to do it, you know. I mean, fortunately for me, I actually did my jumps course twice because when I left 7, I went off to Hong Kong for 2 years as sergeant, and I had assumed I'd go back to 7 as a chief clerk. But that didn't come about, and obviously, as you're aware, I ended up as 3rd chief clerk. They must have wondered what happened when they got me, to be fair.
So what made you come off the guns and then be, you know, artillery clerk then, wasn't it? Yeah.
I would say when it comes to soldiering, I'm fine until I get cold and wet, and then I just want to retreat into a warm room out of the way. So, because when I left Bramco, I was on the guns. Arrived in Roberts Barracks in Osnabrück, and it was I think there was 6 of us from juniors and about 12 from Woolwich, and the 6 lads from juniors, I think all bar 1, went to HQ battery.
Right.
So we were either signallers, clerks. I went to the Incel for the radar troop. We had a motor locating assembly and radar troop. So I was part of the radar troop. But you couldn't do nothing. My first ever exercise in Germany, I kid you not, I was just like, right, you go and see the Q man, he'll sort you out. And do you know when you see in the old cartoons of the jokes and then the squaddies are peeling spuds? And it was. I'm there, sat there, peeling spuds, bashing Dixies, helping the chefs in the kitchen where the field kitchen set up, getting the old number 1 burners going and and then when everyone's had the dinners, you'd be cleaning more Dixies. And then when you weren't doing that, you were doing fatigues. And when you weren't doing that, so I just go back the big tents we used to have in the train areas that like marquee tents, so you could all just dust out in your dust bags. What's your name, son? Good morning, sir. What you doing? Nothing, sir. Right, get your kit on, you're on guard. You know, so it was kind of like, I need to find something that suits my persona, and it might be useful when you come out of the military, you know what I mean? Because you're thinking, well, I'm not going to get many jobs as a gunner, field gunner, like am I? But
no.
So yeah.
Oh, that was my idea when I was in juniors as well. Like they'd stopped doing the clerk's course at juniors, and then they started the all arms one at Worthy Down, and I think we were one of the first courses through. And I volunteered for it because I thought, oh, easy life. in an office, not getting fucked about and stuff like that. And my troop sergeant, it was the first time he ever put like an hand on me and grabbed me and just said, don't do it. You are not a clerk. I says, I can do anything. I'll be great. Went off and done the clerk's course. We nearly all got sacked because the bar was open at lunchtimes then. So the afternoon lessons, I don't really remember that well. And we just ran amok down there because you can imagine we've just done a year at juniors and then they're sent to this like proper unit with no supervision, and we've got money and the bars are open. It was chaos. And then we got back. We had to go back to Bramcote before we flew out to Germany because I went to 4-7 to start with. And the troopies were there. They were just like, "Come here, you. We've had reports." And I got a bit of a telling off, let's say. But they said to me, "You won't last. You are not suited to be a clerk." And I was like, "You know what? They were right. They were right. I was shite." You know what it's like when the first job you get in like an RHQ is just filing the letters, doing the photocopying and all that, and they'd say, "Right, photocopy this," and I'd never pay attention. We had one photocopy in the regiment. I'd photocopy it, put it in the pigeonhole, and then the battery clerks would be coming back going, "Well, where's the second page?" I was like, "What are you on about?" "Oh yeah, there's two sides to that." Just stuff like that, silly things, and that. I was just shit. So Hong Kong, how was that then?
Well, what it was, because I was an artillery clerk, I'd been the battery clerk at G Battery for the best part of about 7 or 8 years. And I knew at some stage, if I got my sergeant, I'd have to move on, as it were. And I was the dock sergeant. And then from there, became the assistant chief clerk. So I thought it's just a natural progression. I'll get the chief's job at some point. But you had to go away from the regiment, and you'd had to do 2 years working as a clerk at a staff headquarters. I said, well, that's fine. And I think originally I was being posted to HQ Ave South, which is near headquarters. Told me, "Oh yeah, we're all set up, waiting for you, ready to come." And literally a couple of months before I was due to go, so no, they've cancelled the posting. They've got rid of that post, sort of thing. But around about the same time, there was a bombardier in Hong Kong who was a clerk, and he'd been promoted to sergeant. So they suddenly said, "Oh yeah, do you fancy Hong Kong?" And I thought it was a bit of a wind up at first. And I said, "Yeah, why? What's going like?" "So, well, there's a 2-year post in Hong Kong. If you want. That'll be classed as your staff job, and then you should be able to get yourself back here," kind of thing. So I literally just fell on my feet, to be honest. I was married to the first wife then, and we just had our second bairn at the time. So I don't think she was particularly enamoured by being in Hong Kong, and it was probably difficult in the heat and humidity with little, whereas there I am just having the life of Riley, playing rugby out, socialising and making the most of it and having the right all the time. And when I first got there, I was the ops clerk in the headquarters. And you know when you suddenly realise, no, this isn't for me. I'm not cut out to do this sort of thing. And then somebody could see that perhaps I wasn't sort of having a good time. And the superintendent clerk said, "What's the problem?" I said, "I think you need to send me back to your regiment." I says, "I'm not really suited to this." And so what he did was they had a REOC staff clerk in the public relations branch as their chief clerk. And he said, "I'll swap you both over." He says, "He's not getting worked nearly hard enough, and this will be a better job for you." And I kid you not, I got paid, and one of my jobs that I had to do when I did was read the papers. I had to read the papers, see if there's anything of relevance to the military or the army or whatever. And then I had like 2 Chinese staff, and I'd say, "Oh, you cut that out, paste it on an A4 piece of paper, photocopy it, and then took it around the headquarters and give it to all the staff officers." Right, but I've done a bit of hard day's work. Let's go for a swim now. We used to take the press and the reporters and stuff to the Hong Kong-China border, because they wanted to see what the army was doing with regards to the illegal immigrants. Funny enough, there's topical current affair. But yeah, I had a fabulous time. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. And when you think, oh, well, if I've got to go somewhere, you might as well go and have something, because it was being handed over. And was it 98, 99 when they handed back the Chinese? So it was a fabulous time. And probably one of the best 2 years in my army career. Not that I was doing anything physically or specifically military, but just being
enjoyable,
there.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
There was always two places I wanted to go. One was Hong Kong, and I've said this in nearly every podcast I've done. One was Hong Kong, and the other one was New Zealand, and I never got to go either of them. Oh, Belize as well. I wanted to go to Belize, but I never got to go to Belize. But I really wanted to go to Hong Kong, and I don't know why. And it was like, I think it was years later watching Soldier, watching them, when they were in Hong Kong in Soldier. I was thinking, I'd have loved that. I'd have loved that. And then I was, you know what I mean?
I mean, you were there basically to have a good time, because the little garrison was there was never going to stop the People's Republican Army from marching through if they wanted to, were they? To be honest, And why would they attack anyway? Because they knew at some stage that they'd be getting it back anyway. So yeah, and I played my rugby out there. The club I played for was Tigers. And then we had a thing called the British Forces, where teams from the different units all came together at the end of the season and played in different competitions. Go on rugby tours to the Philippines, to Thailand. It was absolutely the life of Riley, to be fair. At the same time, you're still making sure you're getting the ticks in the boxes on your CR, so you're being looked at. And then I'd come off the board to be a Chief Clerk, Staff Sergeant. And funnily enough, 7 Hour Chair were over on excise elements of the regiment, and the CEO was there. Oh, says, while you're here, can I ask you, what's the chances of me getting back to the regiment and being Chief? He said, well, I can't make the person leave who's already there, he says. So if you've been promoted, you should be grateful, and you never know, you should be. And sure enough, the guy didn't want to move on. He was settled in Aldershot anyway, and came off the board and was told I was going to 3RHA. I suppose I was disappointed because I was still that young, crazy, cutting about me Redberry, and now suddenly I was going to just be another ordinary, back in the mainstream sort of thing. And again, you're suddenly going to be in a regiment you don't never served in before.
Yeah.
You probably don't know anybody, one thing or another. But I had a letter from the RSM, who was Matt McPherson at the time, and it was a lovely letter. He said, "Oh, I won't be here when you arrive," because he was going off to be the RASM. But he said, "I'm sure you'll have no problem settling in. Look forward to meeting you at some point." And then I got a letter from the CEO, was Freddie Viggers, and same again. Congratulations. Look forward to seeing you. One thing or another, and I'm sure you'll have no problems as far as the administration of the regiment goes. He says, but the more important matter is, he says, I need some silverware from the rugby team. So he wasn't bothered about getting a Chief Clerk. He was just happy to get a rugby player in. So that was quite nice, and I still see Freddie to this day. Smash and blow, absolutely smash.
I've never met a person who had a bad word to say about that bloke.
Oh, absolutely. No. I think I was fortunate, and I had 6 years with Third, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time. And I think because I fully embraced it and wanted to be part of the regiment, and not just, I'll just stop here 3 years and see where I go next kind of thing, And I had Freddie Viggers, then I had David Richards, then I had Matthew Sykes.
Yeah. He's a lot of it's weird when I speak to the lads, looking back and stuff like that. They all go, "Oh, I remember Freddie. I remember." I mean, I wasn't in the regiment when Freddie was there, and I joined as Richards was moving. So my first CO that I remember properly from Third was Sykes, and I thought he was an excellent CO. I thought he was a really, really good bloke. But he kind of gets looked over by the people who remember. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, there's three COs there, outstanding, every one of them. You know, all made it to general sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it speaks volumes for them. I mean, Matthew Sykes was my troop commander when I was in 7 RHA, and when he was at YO's branch, he did the commando course in his off period. So, you know, like when they stood down between waiting to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So he went off and did the commando course just for something to do.
Jesus.
He took the boys sailing in the Baltic, and he borrowed his father's yacht, as you do. You know, we all. So then they were sailing around Denmark and what have you, and they pulled into harbour and got tied up, and then they went out for a few drinks with the lads. And as is invariably, when the soldiers are together, they do get a bit loud, get a bit leery, and I think a bit of a fight was starting or something. So Sykes, he's jumped in to try and calm things down. Someone glassed him.
Bloody hell.
And to this day, he has a scar on the side of his nose where he got glassed in the face. And it wasn't until later, they said, the next day when we were all back on the boat and getting ready to set sail again, he pulls his big slither of glass out from his nostril. So I think I best go to hospital and get this sorted. Yeah.
So rugby was a big thing for you then?
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? I started playing rugby as a kid for Durham City. They were called Junior Colts in them days. And it was more the fact you couldn't get in the football team, Brian. That's the truth, isn't it? So if you can't get, because everybody wanted to be in the football team, can't play football, go and try this rugby. And, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I played 12 years or 7 and only had 12 games in the first 15. That's how good they were.
Yeah.
Arrived in third, and within a season, I was playing for the Gunners.
I must admit, I've only ever played rugby a few times, and I didn't like it. They'd stick me in that scrum, and I'd get squashed. You know, and I was never fast enough for I was never fast enough for anything. Never did football or that. My sport was always tug of war, and it always will be. Yeah, and I loved tug of war, and that was it.
You know, it's that closeness that you have in the military camaraderie, and the same I think that comes with rugby. You know, you meet people, and it's that sort of similar likes and one thing another. I still go to a reunion each year for the club I used to play with in Hong Kong. About a dozen of us meet up either in Cardiff or somewhere, go and have a few drinks, bring the girls along and have a meal later on. And it's like, Christ, that's 30 odd years ago, whatever. And we still, you know, it's nice. It's nice.
So you went back to 1 Para as well. Was that after third or?
Yeah, well in 93, we were still we hadn't moved to Topcliffe. We were still in Colchester, and it was RHA 200, I think it was.
Yeah.
At Woolwich, and so all the batteries were there. And literally on the day of the parade was the day that all the clerks in the regiment rebadged to the Adjutant General's Corps. I could not be more good. So from leaving juniors to that point in my military career, I'd been a gunner and I'd always worn a silver cipher. Now suddenly I've got this big, huge Toblerone cap badge and this green Scout Lincolnberry on me. Yeah. And again, it was told to us that this was going to be the way ahead and that we would excel and get ahead. And actually, that's not how it turned out. You know, all the clerks joined it. And then I look at people like Billy Thorpe and LB. Went back to the gunners, back to the regiment on the equipment, and they excelled. Well, LB's still serving, isn't he? You know, he's a major. So, yeah. Hey, and it is what it is. You go with the flow. What happens in somebody's career works for some, doesn't work for others. So you're stuck in. And then it was I should have been posted about 93, and I just said to the CO at the time, it was David Rich, can I just stay here? Can I stay here as long as is possible? Because I'm happy here. And he said, well, we're happy having you, sort of thing. So I ended up doing 5 years solid, and then it came, oh, you got to get posted, and clearly AG Corps struggling to find people to go to somewhere like the parachute regiment and places like this. Well, you fit the bill. And so I was the last serving regimental chief clerk of 3 RHA and the first ever regimental admin war officer of one para. And literally a few months before I was due to go, Matthew Sykes got me in and said, I've had a phone call from 7 RHA. They understand that you're due to move and that they're keen to have you back there. And I was like, oh, yes, please, I'll have some of that. And, you know, when the CO looks at you and goes, can I give you some advice? All right. So he says, from my experience, it's never better the second time around. Yeah. Sometimes you have to. And I thought, well, yeah. And he'd always been good with me. And I said, okay, then, but say, yeah, well, I'll take your point. And he said, listen, if there's anything I can do for you in the future, don't hesitate to call. And he says, and if things don't work out, I'll hold my hand up and say, sorry, Brian, the advice I gave was wrong. So I was meant to go there for 3 years. And after just over 2 years, I wasn't having a great time of it, sort of thing. And quick phone call, and he answers, Colonel Matthews. Oh, hello, Colonel, it's Sir Major Morgan here. Do you remember you said whenever I needed to give you a call? He says, yes. He said, well, this is that call. He said, what can I do for you? I says, well, can I come back to 3rd? And he said, absolutely. He says, can you come to Ireland? Because I think the regiment was just going to Ireland for 6 months tour. And at that point, I'd only just come back from Ireland, one para. So, but he obviously had contacts in the right places. Clearly would have as a CO. And he said, because I remember having an interview with the REO at the time in one para. And it was like, you're going nowhere, need you here. We've got another 6 month tour coming shortly. And I want you to take us. And the next day he comes in, I don't know who you know, but I've got a post order here. There's going to 3 hours. And I knew at that point anyway that the following year, 3rd, we were going to go to Hona.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go to Hona. I only had about 3 years left to do anyway. So for me, it was a case of positioning myself in a part of the country close to where home is, so that when I get out, I'm close to home, and then we'll settle from there, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, one para was certainly something different, you know. Physical wise, I always felt I was probably a reasonably strong, fit guy.
Yeah.
Was up in the top echelons, certainly within 3rd RHA, within the regiment and what have you. When I got there, you were just like, nobody at all. And you know, like your BFT, if someone runs what's the normal time at BFT? About 10 and a half minutes, is it?
Well, for myself, it was about a week and a half.
But if you were running an 8.5 minute BFT, you'd think, well, that's a good.
Yeah.
I would suggest that everybody was in under 9 minutes. It was that kind of pace.
Yeah.
And every day, kid you not, we start the day off with a Bergen. So it was boots, lightweight, top, Bergen, 35 pounds, water bottle, out on the train area, 10 miler. Oh, that's okay, do it in a couple of hours. No. An hour 35. I kid you not, I was literally hanging, absolutely hanging. And, you know, yes, you get them fit, but then you've also got to think, well, hang on, when I finish this and go back and shower and change, I've got to then do a day's work. And their admin was literally, as the story goes, on the back of a fag packet. They weren't really interested in that. And what often happens is because you've been used to standards you have in the regiment that you've served in, so RHA, and then suddenly you're there. There's no bullshit, So I'd be going in the mess and saying, "Gentlemen," and then all going, "Fuck off your hat." only the ladies call us gentlemen. Oh yeah. So
it's funny you say that about the back of the fag packet, because I've interviewed someone else. You'll know him, Ian Constantine.
Yeah.
And he was saying he was on one of the inspection teams that were going around, and he did mention something about the paras. There was no way. I think what he said was along the lines of never would they have passed any inspections, but they were always needed. So it was just kind of, go on, you've passed type of thing.
Well, the difference between when I was the chief and third, and we were getting ready for an annual inspection, and we ripped everything out, renewed everything was laid out, the silver service tea, cups of coffee and biscuits, none of that. And then you come to get all the, the library, which would be like the manual military law, the SOP and everything. You were looking for stuff, and it's just been chucked in the back of my M4 box for about 10 years. You're like, it's never been amended or brought up to date. It was an absolute nightmare. And I'm sure they just wanted a failure, but again, like you said, because you're spearhead battalion, you can't do anything about it. But I have to admit, you have to admire their sort of kudos there, their aggression. And I remember saying to somebody, "Oh, you don't join the army to go to war." These people do.
Yeah.
These people definitely did. That was their whole ambition, was to be the best. And you'd be in the admin office, and a guy come in, where are you from? Oh, South Africa. What are you doing? Oh, I always wanted to join the parachute. And they were absolutely multinational, even before we had all our Commonwealth soldiers. Yeah. Unbelievable. And it was all like, we've heard about the paras, that's what I want to be. It was either join the Marines or join the paras. Yeah.
I mean, the reputation goes before them. I mean, with people my age, it was always the Falklands. That just, that brought it to the fore for everyone, really. The paras, the commandos. They were I think everyone else forgot everyone else was there. It was just them. Yeah.
Well, because one para were in Ireland when the Falklands kicked off. Yeah. They didn't go south. So there's always been that little bit of a animosity and chip on the shoulder. And even while I was at one para, they were asking for documents, anything to support the inquiries into Bloody Sunday. Well, clearly, that was 72, and I was there 95 to 97. Anything that should have been there or may have been there had long gone since. So there was never going to be anything there. But I think they just wanted to do something to match 2 and 3 para.
Yeah.
And so literally every day, if something was kicking off in the world, the CEO in the phone, it's 1 para, we'll do that. And it was literally like, what? Yeah, I was sat one Sunday night watching the news, and it was all kicking off at Drum Creek. I went, so that's getting out of hand. The police car, I said, they'll send it. So the last people they're going to send is 1 para. You think 1 para on Bloody Sunday, they're going to... So the next day, I rings her up at about 5. Sorry, love, I'm just getting off the plane. And we literally, because Spearhead Battalion, off we went. By the time we got to Portadown and set up the ops room, they had, I think, the RUC on the bridge. Then there was 2 of the battalions on the field, and then there was where we were going to win through 1 para, and the RUC officer says, "What do you propose to do should they try and break through the ranks?" And I kid you not, the CO said, "If they try and breach our lines, we will shoot to kill." And it was like, well, who's this again? Oh, this is 1 para. Within about, I think, 2 hours, they'd moved the barricade and the marchers went ahead, and there was literally rioting throughout Northern Ireland because of the whole incident. And we were then redeployed to the Maze, and then I think most of the battalion were in and around the Ardoyne, firing off a year's supply of plastic bullets, you know. And they kept us there for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I think being who we are, or being who they were, one para, that they don't want them around too much because it antagonises the locals.
Yeah.
So one thing's to calm down a bit is right, get them back to Aldershot sort of thing. I mean, we were due to go. I was meant to go with them to Dungannon in '97, but instead I jumped ship and obviously came back to third. But I remember sitting in Science Mess, and it was a couple of the local councillors and an RUC officer. And I kid you not, they were more or less begging them, please don't come in heavy-handed. Please don't start to... and they were just, no, sorry, we're here to fight terrorists, no matter what side they're on. And if anyone gets in our way, we will sort them out, sort of thing. So they do what it says on the tin.
So that was you back at third then when we were going over to Germany, and that was you coming to the end of your time.
Indeed. Yeah. By that stage, you've got one eye on, well, what am I going to do? You know, at that stage, you had to leave it for you. There was none of this stay until you're 55, one thing another. So, and it's a case of what do you want to do? What, you know, and I suppose like most people, you're a little bit anxious, a little bit nervous. I don't think what transferable skills I've got. Am I going to be able to fit in? What shall I do? You know, and my aim, and then my research was all focused on joining the police. And I'd gone all the way down the selection process, passed the fitness test and everything. Got called for a medical. This is for Cleveland Police, and went for a medical. And the doctor says, "Oh, who told you to come here?" I said, "Well, your HR department." He says, "Oh," he says, "You won't get in the police, mate." He says, "Not with the damage that you've got to your neck." I said, "What damage to my neck?" Well, clearly, I had got damage to my neck because from rugby and parachute and all this kind of thing. And then obviously, when they'd wrote to the doctor at Topcliffe, who was the local GP, not being military-wise, he didn't just say, "Yeah, fit for duties and everything." He said, "No, hypothetical question, how do I know what will affect him in the future?" However, he's got significant injury at C5, 6, and 7, which has got X-rays to prove it. So that scuppered that for me, and I was like, "What am I going to do now?" sort of thing, you know. So the first 3 years, I got a job working in Northallerton for the local district council as a verification officer, going around checking people weren't fiddling their housing benefit and council tax and stuff. But the difference from being in the military after 24 years to suddenly being here, Mr. Suit and Tie, and some shitty scroll bags house, and it's like, what am I doing? And I struggle, I think. I certainly think for the first 3 years to get adjusted and settle in. And I got the British Legion to help me out with the fact that I'd been knocked back by the police.
Yeah.
And they took it to a tribunal, and I got, I think, about $4,500 because I'm being discharged from the army. It says fully fit, exemplary service, no issues. So I should be able to get. And then I was saying I didn't get a war pension because they said, "Oh, it didn't qualify or cross the threshold or whatever it was." What was quite incredible is that after 3 years of being out, I got a job working in the Police National Computer Bureau for North Yorkshire Police. And from there, the job evolved. So I had 2 years just doing data input. And then I moved to being an operational support officer. So in uniform, helping the cops out, doing the bits and pieces, checking people's driving license and stuff in the front office and what have you. And then I was going to be a PCSO, passed the medical, fully fit to do those duties, no vacancy at the moment. And then a job came up in the custody suite. So again, passed the medical, no issues there, sir. And so I had 10 years working in the cells at Northallerton Police Station.
Bloody hell, I bet you've seen some shit there, do you?
Oh, I tell you what. And I think it was a different era as well because policing's changed a heck of a lot now. And I don't think custodies are the same. I think it's now all about treatment of the detained person, health and safety, making sure you saw risk assessment, was the hot chocolates, the they had to pass the attitude test, and if they failed the attitude test, then they got sorted, and we'll come and see you tomorrow morning, that kind of thing.
I must admit, my only experience was that place as a night in it, and they were great with me. They gave me a lift back to camp and everything the next morning. It was great.
Do you know what it is, though, isn't it? If you treat somebody reasonable, but if somebody's spitting at you or gobbing off at you, what are you going to say? Yeah, you get no change.
I got lifted in Thirst Town Centre for some affray type thing, and I walked away from it, and the police car just pulled up in front of us, and they looked at us, and I just went, "Shall I get in the back then?" And they went, "Yeah, all right." And I just sat in the back. And the woman police officer who sat in the front, looked back over her shoulder, went, "That's the easiest arrest I've ever had." And off we went. It was, it was one of them nights type of thing. It happens. So what happened after that then? You did something with what they call them, the Purple Warriors.
Yeah. I was still keeping myself reasonably fit, doing bits of charity events and one thing and another. And then I get a phone call, and it was an officer who I'd served with in 7, Nigel Bedford, and it's that hello Brian, yes, it's Nigel here, and it's that kind of hello, how can I help you? He says, I'm looking to set up a team of injured and serving veterans in a dragon boat. And I wondered if you'd be interested in helping out. Well, coincidentally, I'd done dragon boat racing when I was in Hong Kong.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
But you know what? When I left Hong Kong, I thought, well, I'll never do this ever again in my life. And then suddenly, there he is, ringing me up. So they were having 3 taster sessions around the country. One down in near Windsor, one in Exeter, and then I had one in Stockton, which is on the doorstep, really. So I went along to this test. I said, listen, I don't want to just be doing admin and handing out T-shirts and bits and pieces. I said, I want to be in the boat as well, And he said, well, what injuries have you got that would... And not all injuries are visible, obviously. So, my neck's damaged. And I dislocated my shoulder playing rugby, so that doesn't quite sit right. So he says, yeah, I'm sure that ticks all the boxes. And we had this training day, and it went quite well, and it was quite successful. The following day was a regatta, so I got stuck in with a crew there. And then after that, it was kind of like, well, we're going to have training sessions now. And they used to have them near Heathrow Airport. And he said, well, would you come along? Yeah, absolutely, happy to do that. And then they decided they would enter a competition. So the club had been going about a year. That was 2016. So in 2017, they took part in an international tournament in Hong Kong. So I thought, I definitely got to have a piece of this. And it was a case of you have to fund part of it yourself. It's not everything's a freebie sort of thing, and you got to make sure. And it was nice to be with military-minded people again,
Yeah.
And there's a variety of injuries. There was a lad there who was a below knee amputation, so I think he's had a car accident or something. Lived with it. Operations, one thing in the end, had that off. Another guy, he'd been shot in Afghanistan, severed his spinal cord, said he'd never walk again, but he was up and about with sticks. And then there'd be other ones who had got PTSD, and far be from me to say that you can't prove they have or haven't, as it were, when you can't see it. When you look at some people and you think, I'm not 100% convinced, but hey, to be fair, we got a team together, we got the funding together, we went to Hong Kong, and we were literally racing in Hong Kong Harbour in front of the office where I used to work when I was there as a sergeant. Absolutely brilliant time. Fantastic time. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And then from there, strength to strength, where, I stayed with the club and the charity, was a trustee for a time. Then we went to the World Club Cruise in 2018. And what it was at that stage, there wasn't any disabled category or parrot dragon. And so essentially you had a team of disabled paddlers racing against fully fit, able-bodied people, which is still great when you think these people in some cases don't come out of the house for months on end because their injuries and the things that they're coping with and one thing and another. And we went to the World Club Cruise, and what they did is they put a little competition on within the main tournament because we were just getting our asses whooped by some of these crews, these are young, fit athletes, and these slightly portly, aging veterans and what have you. And so they had, I think there was 2 teams who were cancer survivor teams, all ladies, and there was 2 teams which were, I think they were Canadian universities, so they were all girls teams, and then there were us. And essentially, we'd raced 3 times. Each race we finished 3rd, which is what you would expect. But what they've done is because we were the only ones that were disabled, so to speak, they gave us gold medals. And that was meant to be the springboard then to take it on from there so that the following year there would be a disabled category. And then COVID came in and that kind of put the kibosh on things. Yeah. I think the World Championships last year in Thailand, and there was disabled crews from America, from the Philippines, from Australia, from Canada, but not one from the UK because unfortunately they haven't had the momentum carrying on. But I think Purple Warriors still exists, and they're hoping to build on that. And I think they've got a team, or they're hoping to have a team go away this year in September to the Club Crew Championships in Italy. So, if there's anybody out there injured or impaired, all you have to do, it's one of the few sports where you can actually sit, because that's what you are. You're sat on a bench in a boat, and it's just a case of either paddling one side or the other side. Yeah, and guys can do it who are amputees, girls can do it. It's any age, it's not restrictive. And it's that whole thing about teamwork, because it's all about coordination, synchronization. Yeah, they're not the fittest of individuals, but that you can build on that. It's just getting the technique right. And then again, it's that sort of interaction and socialise, like you say about the army, your mates, your camaraderie. You might not know or see one another for a month, then you see your bloke, and it's just like you were back in barracks, isn't it? Yeah. And that's just how it is. And it's that kind of, taking the banter and taking the mickey and one thing and another. But it's that giving them people who have probably got a lot of other things going on in their lives, and they just need that arm around the shoulder or a bit of support. Yeah. Might only be just to sit listening. And sometimes you sit and think, but you've listened to him, Brian. He probably feels better because normally nobody listens to him, sort of thing. But, and it is sometimes it's just being there for these people. Some of them are in desperate places, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I've discovered that doing this. I've spoken to some lads who've been glad to come on and, even, I wouldn't say just sit and talk to someone, but, it's that little thing where, like you're saying, the bond, they're talking to someone who was in the army and it's easy for them to talk and stuff like that. But going back to the Purple Warriors, I've already interviewed someone who was there, Lee Duncan. Yeah. So he's give a good account of it as well. And Natasha's been in touch with me as well. So I'm hoping to do like one with her where basically a little quick bit about the army and then do, a big, I wouldn't say an expose on the Purple Warriors, but I think it's one of them things that not a lot of people know about, and it needs to be publicised a lot more than it has been.
Yeah. Well, I think what happened was when it first started off in 2016, it was like there was a few officers involved at the top end, and they were kind of pushing it and getting all the interviews on radio and on forces and things and advertising and one thing and another. And it seems that after the COVID thing, And since then, it's maybe lost a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And so it needs somebody now to sort of take it on board again and start afresh. But anybody who wants
yeah, with a lot of things like that, though, after COVID, a lot of things have just died off. You know, people are looking in on themselves a lot more than they were before. You know, and it's,
oh no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I was hospitalised with coronavirus. I ended up in hospital with the wife. We both had it quite bad, and I still to this day don't feel A1 100%. And I think that's perhaps the residue of whatever this virus was or wasn't. And
I mean, I was quite lucky. I caught it, and all it did with me, and in all honesty, all it did with me was make me sleep. And I must have slept for about 3 days, and I felt fucking great afterwards. I was just like, give me that again, please.
Well, we just didn't. The wife and I just didn't seem to be getting any better. Didn't seem to be recovering. And it was a daughter phoned the doctor, and he said, "No, can they not come into the surgery?" So he says they can't get out of bed, And so he came out, and I'd actually done one of these swab tests because, I don't know why, because actually, if you feel like death, you've got something. Why should a piece of plastic down the back of your throat? But he came in and took our temperatures, did all the various checks, and he immediately went, right, I must get an ambulance here. and literally blue lighted us up to James Cook Hospital. And then I was in there for about 16 days, and the wife was in there for about a week or so on an intensive care. Yeah, it was not a pleasant time.
Place, yeah, no. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the PPMA. You've had involvement with that as well, haven't you?
Well, funny enough, it was. I think. Do you remember Carl Britton was the RSM?
Yeah.
And I think it was him that kind of kicked the thing off and got it started. And I was out of the army by the time it started, and he invited me down. I think we went to Warrington for a time for the reunions because they moved about a bit. And Carl said, "Oh, will you be my guest on the top table?" And the various generals and bits and pieces. I thought, "Nice, I've done well here. Get on the top table." But yeah, and I would go to the dues at Dudley, and then I went down to the cenotaph, and it was absolutely an honour to march at the cenotaph. The only grief I would have was the fact they wouldn't let me wear a maroon beret. So everyone, because it's typical RHA, you will all wear a black overcoat, you will white shirt, regimental tie, no deviations. Bull shoes, the lot, your beret, your red backing behind your cipher. So I rocked up on the first time I did it, and I'd got me maroon beret with a silver cipher and a red backing, thinking, I'll say nothing, just let me turn up, I'll shove this on my head. And Brian O'Neill at the time went, "Don't you dare think you're going on my parade with that on your head." And so his son was, Mitch. Can't think of his name. He was a sergeant in the regiment. He says, "Here, give us your beret." He says, "Get that on. You're not wearing that." So, but yeah. And I think looking up at the wider army, the red cipher and the PPMA certainly seems to be a cut above anything else that I've seen.
Yeah. And
I appreciate it's got that hierarchy thing in it, but I suppose it's about that's the way it's been established and set up. I'm a member of a thing called the British Airborne Forces Club, and we meet up twice a year. Once to go and do a 10-miler in Aldershot, and then in May we go down to Brecon and do Penny Fan. We do the fan dance, get at the top, lay a few rees, say a few words, back down to Brecon Rugby Club, and a few bees in there. There's no officers involved in the club. It's there is a committee, an ex-RSM parareg is in charge, But what they'll do is, if someone says, "Oh, I've heard that Fred Smith's struggling a bit," all right, we've got somebody that needs some immediate assistance. Well, most of these charities takes them a lifetime to get things rolling. Or they'll say, "I'm sorry, you don't meet our criteria," and we'll just say, "Right, we've got this lad. He's power edge. He's got this. We want to give him 500 quid to get him squared away." Where you go, yeah. And it's about helping your own.
I mean, I spoke to Mike Webb 2 weeks ago. I interviewed him, and he touched on a bit about what the Red Cipher can do for people and stuff like that. But we mainly spoke about that after we'd done the recording. Yeah. And I didn't understand. I didn't, I don't really get involved with things like that. But for what he explained, actually, what the Red Cipher does, how much it gives back to the regiment. It's stuff like it helps with the PRI funds and stuff like that, and they've got the if people need help, they'll do that. So I'm hoping in the future, sometime soon, that I'll get to speak to one of the committee trustees, not committee.
They actually helped me when I went to Hong Kong and to Zeged in Hungary for the World Club Cruise, because we had to part fund our involvement in it.
Yeah,
you had to raise your own sponsorship or pay out your own back pocket. And I wrote to the trustees and submitted a thing and said, "Look, I'm doing this event." And the only proviso, they said, "Oh, yeah, we'll give you and Tasha this amount between the two of you. We would ask that you just have a photograph taken with the crew holding the 3RHA flag."
Yeah.
So, it helped.
Which is fair enough, yeah.
Yeah.
You're not going to paint the boat blue and yellow.
No, absolutely, yeah.
Right, Brian. I think that's come to the end of it now for us. Where we've got to. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come and chat with me. I know it's always a bit weird that you sat in your chair there, just looking into a phone, talking to an idiot in a room miles away. But again, thanks for that. It's been very interesting, and you seem as though you've enjoyed your time in the army, and you're enjoying life now as well, by the sound of it.
Absolutely, yeah. You got to enjoy your life, mate. It's gone too quick, and then sometimes you think, I left it too late.
Yeah, we're not spring chickens anymore, are we? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely.
Absolutely. Again, I mean, thank you for this. I do believe that a few people are going to be surprised that when it comes to time for me to put this out, when I put some images out, that they're going to see that you've done it. So it might bring some other people in as well. There's a fair few people out there I'd like to interview. It's it is what it is. But I'll stop the recording now. So I'll just like to say, right. Well, thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week I'll be talking to Louise Banton about her time in the Royal Artillery, and once she completed her time, her decision to emigrate to Australia with her partner. And then she joined the Australian Defence Forces. That'll be an interesting one. So tune in next week. Bye-bye for now.